Thank you, Mr. Chair, and congratulations to you and soon-to-be Vice Chairs Nahalea and Moore. Our COVID preparations have been consuming many across the university, and you heard from a number of our faculty members, and let me once again thank them for their incredible work both last spring and over the summer to prepare for a fall that will be like no other. In partnership with support staff across our 10 campuses and administrators across our 10 campuses. We did release an initial set of guidelines for the University of Hawaii system. Those cover all of the areas typical for what it will look like to open and provide services in the COVID environment for us for the fall. I won't go through the gory details except to say that we look at the personal safety practices, what we expect of individuals. We look at the institutional safety practices, facilities and spaces, scheduling of classes, housing, services, events, office spaces and staffing, non-discrimination, harassment, and behavioral health as well. Using the system guidelines, each of our 10 campuses then has implementation plans for how they will ensure that these guidelines actually transfer into action on the ground on our campuses. And it's pretty easy to review the system guidelines and the campus guidelines just at www.hawaii.edu/COVID. And I will say these have been shared with state officials. That includes Department of Health, HIEMA, the Hawaii Emergency Management Agency, as well as the 4 mayors and their staffs. One of the activities that has been most consuming is preparing for classes for the fall semester. Our campuses have all looked at literally each and every one of the thousands of course sections that had been planned to be offered in the fall and reviewed the modality and placement. As you can imagine, when we implement physical distancing of 6 feet, none of our classrooms can hold as many students as had been previously scheduled. So every classroom literally had to be resized for how many students could be accommodated safely in fall 2020. Just to throw out at Manoa what that looks like, 3,344 sections, of which at this point it looks like 54% will be online, 23% in person, and about 23% hybrid. Those numbers vary by campus. At UH Hilo, students will be able to access 85% of the courses entirely online, and 75% will have some kind of face-to-face component. The reason that doesn't add up to 100% is that students will have choices in many cases in high flex courses of either attending in person or attending from home online. UH West Oahu, which has always had the highest percentage of online classes, literally has only 3 fully face-to-face sections in the fall, with 27% hybrid and 72% fully online. So you get a sense of what that is taking. And once again, let me thank our staff on the campuses that have done the work to size the classrooms, to figure out the scheduling, and our faculty, each of whom is looking at every section that they're offering and determining the best modality in which they can ensure that our students learn. It's quite a remarkable achievement, and I think you should all be very proud of the work taking place on the campuses. A word about enrollment. We don't usually talk much about summer enrollment, but I think as a sign of the times, our summer enrollment is up substantially this year. UH Manoa is up about over 23% when measured by credits. The headcount enrollment is a little bit less than that. Community college enrollments are up about 32% over last year. And of course, on the community colleges, that's largely a factor of the fabulous Next Step program that I shared with you last year, last meeting, that was really targeted at the high school graduating class of 2020 to help them figure out their next steps, including with free community college classes supported with philanthropic funds. UH Hilo and UH West Oahu are relatively flat for the summer. As critically, most of us look at the fall numbers every day, some twice a day when the numbers are updated. I will share that the numbers are still uncertain. The trends are all heading in the right direction. So while our numbers as of today, compared to a year ago, the same number of days before the start of the fall semester, our numbers are still a little bit lower. The gaps have been closing pretty quickly over these last weeks. What we are observing, and I think many of you are seeing this with your relatives and friends and children of friends, decisions are being made very, very late this year. Students and their families are really trying to assess conditions and options. There's not much of a job market. It's not a very good time to take a gap year and travel, that's for sure. And many students who were thinking of going to the mainland, particularly to attend an expensive private school, are reconsidering that decision and thinking of starting here in Hawaii or transferring back to a Hawaii campus with consideration of perhaps going back to their mainland school when things resume some sort of normalcy, certainly not the old normal, but probably some kind of new normal. We have made ourselves as welcoming as we can to those students. We extended our admissions deadline till August 1st, and that's really for best consideration, including for financial aid. But our campuses do continue to accept applications for admission even after August 1st. Let me say a word about research. We announced just a couple weeks ago that last fiscal year we received $456 million in extramural funding. That is our second consecutive year over $400 million, 7.1% increase, and it's the second highest total in our history. In 2011, we were about a little over 30 million higher, but that had a substantial portion of stimulus funds from the last recession. And I will say that our $456 million in extramural funding for last fiscal year does not include nearly $45 million in CARES funding, and that's because that goes for institutional support. So we didn't think it was appropriate to include it in the number, but all told, that would drive us over $500 million. Let me share just three specific projects that caught my eye over the past month, and then some of the work in the pipeline, because we are determined to continue our work both to serve the people of Hawaii and the Pacific and the world, but also to bring in more money from other sources in addition to our state general funds, which are stressed, as the testifiers all acknowledged, as well as our tuition revenue, which remains uncertain in these difficult times. The National Cancer Institute notified us that they're going to add a fifth year to our Cancer Center P30 grant. That is our Cancer Center designation through NCI. The funding is in the range of $1 million extra, but just as much that extends our certification in an incredibly important program, because more than the grant itself, it qualifies us to be at the elite tier of competition for the billions in cancer funding that the federal government awards competitively. The Pacific Island Ocean Observing System, or PAC-IOS, here in our School of Ocean, Earth Science and Technology, received $4.2 million from NOAA to deploy more ocean sensors to monitor sea levels, tides, currents, waves, and temperature. That both helps us with forecasts of severe weather events over the long term, but I can tell you from my experience in my previous job when I was on disaster management alert at all times, we literally watched the data from those buoys after the Japan tsunami. Every hour or so as that data came in, it helped us understand what the impact would be of a potential tsunami here in Hawaii. Lastly, let me mention a grant, a $5 million grant from the National Science Foundation to the Laboratory for Advanced Visualization and Applications, or Lava Lab. I think many of you have visited the Lava Lab. It's an amazing lab led by Jason Lee, who just joined us 5 or 6 years ago. And the project is to lead the development of something called SAGE 3, and it is the next generation of what is literally the most important global visualization environment, software environment for visualization. And what they will be doing is adding artificial intelligence into SAGE 2, the current version of that software, to provide essentially a smart co-pilot so that as you're navigating massive amounts of data, you'll have some assistance beyond what you can envision for yourself. The partners on this are amazing. Also, University of Illinois Chicago, which was one of the nation's original pioneers in what we used to call computer graphics, and Virginia Tech. And again, UH Manoa is the lead on that project. The Cancer Center and PAC-IOS are multi-year renewable programs, so they're part of our strength year in and year out. And I just want to mention and close with a few more of the projects in the pipeline that we expect to see over the next year. One is our EPSCoR grant. This is a $20 million 5-year program to improve our research competitiveness. We need to reapply every 5 years, and it is extremely competitive. We have an amazing concept that will be statewide, including with Chaminade University participates with us in this one. And we'll be looking at microbiomics integrated with data analytics to advance sustainability. So we'll leverage our strengths in data science with our Lava Lab at the forefront and artificial intelligence, machine learning to accelerate what is already world-class leadership at UH Manoa in the understanding of the microbiome, that is microbes of all forms in the environment on land and sea. We are starting a major project with the Navy to look at the Red Hill water tanks supported by the federal government, a great example of how we apply our technical and engineering expertise to address a real challenge here in Hawaii. We have a new multi-million-dollar project starting in indigenous health involving JABSOM and the Office of the Vice President for Research. That will be a multi-million-dollar project. We have a new project to promote health for Pacific Island veterans. We're doing that with the VA, several $1 million as well, and a new program on coastal resilience with DOD, where we will be looking at DOD facilities that are on coastal zones here in Hawaii and other places, leveraging, again, our best in the world understanding of sea level rise and its impact to actual problems within our community and faced by the federal government. So let me on this one thank Vice President Sirmos for his work with our delegation, congressional delegation, to build and ensure support for these new programs, which we expect to be multi-year, multi-million-dollar programs to address challenges here in Hawaii and create knowledge that helps others around the world, as well as the work to maintain ongoing support for some of our major programs like the Hawaii Natural Energy Institute that similarly addresses challenges and opportunities here in Hawaii and beyond. So with that, let me close my President's report, and thank you, Mr. Chair.